All right, guys. My name is Dr. Sharnael Wolverton Sion, and I am one of the hosts of Dr. Sharnael True TV, as well as Craig Walker, who's here with us from the UK. But yeah, he just left the States and made it home. I guess you're there now, Craig.
I am. I'm home now. I landed at about 10 o'clock this morning, and I've not slept. So it's all good. It's all good. We're here.
Yes. Well, we're glad that you made it back, and I actually got to meet him in person for the first time after 5 years of doing a show with him. So that
Indeed.
was really, really nice. We are really excited today about a special guest that we have here. Victor Fuhrman is here. He is actually from the Northeast Coast, and we're going to talk a little bit about synchronicities, about his background. He has a beautiful book of poetry that he's written, and he also has another book about prayers of pets and blessings of pets, which I'm going to talk a little bit about too. And I'll have to have him show his book of poetry. It's so gorgeous, and it's really blessed my heart. But without any further ado, we really, really are excited to have you, Victor. And welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sharnael. I really appreciate it. And Craig, nice to meet you for the first time.
Nice to meet you too, Victor.
So Victor has quite an interesting background and does a lot of really cool things. And I'm just going to have you start out, Victor, if you're cool. Should I say Reverend or Doctor? I don't even like.
Call me Victor, please.
Okay.
When I do official services and things of that nature, so just Victor is fine.
So tell everybody. I know a little bit, but tell me a little bit with Craig and everybody else who's watching, like what you do, how you landed in this space, and because I know you have a podcast too, but you're full-time ministry, right?
No, I'm not actually. The ministry is part of my path. A very, very quick story about my life. I was born in Brooklyn, New York. I'm coming up on my 72nd birthday next week. And I had a series of experiences as a child that were, at the time, to me, unique. I was labeled by my parents and by therapists as a child with an overactive imagination because I was seeing and reporting things that no one else saw or reported. And my first experience that I consciously remember, I was around 5 years old, and I used to go to what I called night school. And my teachers would come and they'd take me to a special classroom. And I would come back this would be 1958, with information that I had no other source for. Wasn't learning it anywhere. I was 5 years old. And come back and talk about things like electronics, things like building radios, where boys my age were playing with toy soldiers and with other types of sporting goods and things of that nature. But it says my browser has lost connection to my camera. Make sure the right camera selected. I haven't changed anything. Don't know what happened.
We can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you good. Yeah, it's just the camera's gone for some reason.
Let me see if I restart. There we go. All right, I'm sorry about that. See, you start talking about this stuff and the energy changes and look what happens. So in any event, I was having visitations by what I would now term extraterrestrials. And rather than calling my experiences abductions, I called them night school because, as I shared, I was learning things and having information that I had no other source for. When I was in first grade, the teacher had a book on the shelf called You Will Go to the Moon. And that would be 1959, 1960. And I asked the teacher, I said, can I borrow that book and take it home? She said, yes, of course. 2 weeks later, she said, you borrowed the book. It was loaned to you. You have to return it. And I said, I'm sorry, I can't. And she said, why? And I said, because it's wrong. And she said, how do you know it's wrong? And I said, because I've been there. So needless to say, my parents were called into the principal's office, and everybody said he just has an overactive imagination. Strangely enough, when my mother was late in her years and was ill, I was taking lunch to her every Saturday. And at one of those Saturday gatherings, we were talking about various things. And I said, Mommy, you never believed when I shared with you the experiences that I was having as a kid. I said, you never had any unusual experiences, did you? And she said, no, except for that time. And when she said except for that time, the hair on the back of my neck started standing up. She said, except for that time that you were about a year old, which would have been January, February of 1954. She said you were about a year old, and one night about 3:30 in the morning, you were crying, and I got up to make you a bottle, and I went to the kitchen, and all of a sudden, this strange light came through the window, and that's the last thing I remember until the next day. I said, Mom, I said, thank you for confirming for me what I knew was happening when I was a child. I said, you didn't have any other strange experiences? She said, no, except for that time your father was having surgery and I was in the waiting room. And all of a sudden I was on the ceiling looking down at myself. She had an out-of-body experience. So I knew then that she was admitting to me that she had these experiences, and that even though I was told that I was imagining things, she understood what I was talking about when I was a kid. Another thing that happened, I was 7 years old, and I was very close with my paternal grandfather. He was a bit of a mystic himself. And I'm sitting in my room reading a book, and I look up, and my grandfather's standing there. I said, Grandpa, when did you come in? Didn't say a word, just smiled and sort of dissolved and disappeared. And I went into the living room, and I said to my parents, Grandpa was here. And they said, oh, you're imagining things again. And a couple of minutes later, word came that he had passed away. So that was my first experience of seeing spirit out of body. And I'm so grateful to him for that affirmation that we do go on after the body ceases to exist, that the soul continues forever, that the soul is eternal. And speaking of which, when my mother passed in January of 2020, I was at her side along with my sister. And I started having these visions of circles and rings, and it didn't really resonate with me immediately. But then a poem came through me, and it's the title poem of my book, Circles and Rings, a collection of poetry from the soul. And I'll share it with you. It's a short poem, but it sort of expressed what my understanding was, and that her passing, her transition, taught me. And it says, the path of great beauty for so many things, from atoms to galaxies, circles and rings, natural wisdom that dwells there within, from naught to 360, that magical spin. We circle each other in gravity's dance, as Gaia circles Sol, the solar romance, as Luna circles us in life-giving motion, drawing the tides and inner emotion. And the age of the oak is found in its rings, as in woman and man and all living things. And when the rings stop and life comes to an end, we'll all circle back and dance once again. And that was the inspired poetry that came through her transition. And it's something that I've carried in my heart literally my entire life, but it came through and expressed because of her transition.
You're making me cry again.
No, don't want to do that. Don't want to do that.
No,
And then I grew up, and I had a few remembered experiences. When I was when I was 20, I had enlisted in the Air Force, and I went for initial training in their computer systems for inventory. And then I found an ad in one of the base newspapers that said Air Force is looking for broadcasters for Armed Forces Radio. And I had done some in college, and so I signed up for that, and went to the military information school. And then my first assignment, I was transferred to Seoul, Korea in 1975 for first of 2 years in Korea, 75 and 76, with Armed Forces Radio and Television, or as they called it over there, the American Forces Korean Network. In any event, a couple of stories, and these are stories about what I believe is quantum entanglement, or it's definitely synchronicity, which I also believe is connected to quantum entanglement. In 1975, the first thing that happened was one day I had a message in my head, and the message was this voice, a soft voice, a reassuring voice, a loving voice, but a voice nonetheless that said, you need to call your mother, she has to hear from you. Now, I had no indication that anything was wrong. We would exchange letters monthly. I'd write her letters. And that morning, that voice said, call her. So I did. In those days, for those who were old enough to remember, not many, but old enough to remember, we had extension telephones in our homes where you could pick up one phone in one room and an extension for it in another room. And my mother and sister simultaneously picked up the phone. And I said, Mom, is anything wrong? And my sister says, oh my God, how did he find out? And it turned out that she was scheduled for major surgery the next day. And the voice told me to tell her that the operation would be a complete success. She'd have a complete and full recovery. Everything would be just fine. She needed to hear those words from me. And of course, that's what transpired. So that was what the first long distance, that's 6,000 miles between Korea and New York. So that was my first long distance message. And later that year, I had received an injury to my lower back during a football game. I was playing football. And the pain was rather intense, and I didn't like taking painkillers and drugs. And a friend of mine said, have you ever had acupuncture? And I said, I've heard of acupuncture, but I've never tried it. They said, get acupuncture, it'll be helpful. So I found a Korean acupuncturist. I received a treatment, and the pain literally went away overnight. And I said, this is a miracle, this is wonderful. What I didn't know was that in those days, the acupuncturists in Korea did not necessarily use they didn't use disposable needles. Their sterilization techniques might not have been the best. And hepatitis B was endemic in Korea, which means many people carried it without manifesting the disease. 2 weeks after the treatment, I wake up one morning, I'm feeling weird. I go into the bathroom and I look in the mirror and my eyes are starting to turn yellow. I said, uh-oh, something's not right here. And I went to the base hospital and they looked at me and said, you have hepatitis. And they admitted me. And they started treating me differently than treating the other people on the ward who also had the hepatitis B, giving me transfusions of vitamin K, or not infusions of vitamin K and other things. And one day the doctor came in and said, do you have a will? And I said, no. He said, well, we want you to prepare a will to protect your family. I'll send the Judge Advocate General's office over, a representative, to make a will with you, and that way you protect your family. I said, why? He says, you're very seriously ill, and we don't want to take a chance on anything happening without your family being protected. So they sent a telegram. They had the Red Cross actually sent a telegram back to my mother in New York saying that I was very seriously ill, that my prognosis was not good, and they keep her informed, and she was thrilled to receive that telegram. In any event, I'm laying there one day, and the voice came, and the voice said, ask the doctor for a picture of a normal liver, of a healthy liver. And I always listen to that voice, and the doctor came in to see me, and I said, yeah, something with a photograph or a picture of a healthy liver. He said, why? I said, I'd just like to see it. He said, okay, begrudgingly said, okay. And he came back with an anatomy book and opened it to the page of the picture of the healthy liver, and I started studying that picture. And after about an hour, the voice said, put the book down and place your palms over your abdomen, over the area of the liver. And I did. And I felt this amazing warmth and this tingling sensation, just beautiful tingling sensation. And at some point, I fell asleep. The next morning at 5 a.m., the nurse woke me up. She said, I'm really sorry, we have to take your blood. She took my blood. An hour later, 2 hours later, she came back. She said, the laboratory messed up your sample. We have to take another draw. I said, okay. An hour later, the doctor came in with this incredulous expression on his face and said, after I gave you the book last night, what did you do? And I told him exactly what I did. He says, you're crazy. And I said, why? He said, because last night your liver enzymes were such that we did not think you would survive the night. This morning, they're almost normal. We've never seen anything like that happen before. A miracle. Okay. So that voice, I've come to learn later in life through certain experiences, that voice is a voice from soul level, from angels, which I resonate with angels and angelic activity, not necessarily extraterrestrial in these cases, but definitely loving and supportive angels. And I believe that we all have angels that work with us and guide us through life if we're willing to listen. And that's the big part, is listening, because so many people hear things and they disregard them, or they don't pay attention to them. But when you listen, when you really listen and act upon what they used to call the soft, still voice from within, rather than the ego voice, which shouts at you, this is the voice of angels, the voice of divine guidance. And for me, it's been miracles throughout my life. In any event, spent my time in the Air Force, got out of the Air Force, was looking for a job in broadcasting, because that's what I'd been doing while I was in the Air Force. And in those days, the places that you could get jobs in broadcasting and radio, especially news was what I was looking for. And you had to take basically a 6-day week with very basic wages, unless you had a contact somewhere. I had no contacts. And I decided to put an ad in the Sunday New York Times saying, "Let my communication skills enhance your business." I received a call from a man on Monday. He interviewed me on Tuesday. He hired me on Wednesday. And that began a 44-year career in the industrial welding equipment business, welding technology, welding, also later on a certified welding inspector. And that was my day job. That was what I did. That's what paid the bills. In my early to late 40s, my spiritual path really reopened wide. And it started with, again, a back problem. It's interesting how back problems sort of were my intervention, when we're going into the synchronicity, right? So I had a problem with my back. A friend said, "Have you ever tried yoga?" And I said, "No." And they said, "Well, you got to take yoga classes. Yoga will make you feel much better." And at the time, there was an adult education newspaper near me from a high school near me. And it said, "Study yoga with Judy Hamsa." There's something about her name, Hamsa, which resonated with me. And I said, "This sounds interesting." And I went and I met Judy, who became not only my yoga teacher, but a very, very dear friend. And during the classes, she said, "I love your voice. Would you start facilitating meditation?" So I started facilitating meditation. And we started going on these retreats to a Zen monastery in Livingston Manor, New York, in upstate New York, beautiful place. And we would have a group of friends together doing yoga and meditation. And at one of these weekend gatherings, someone mentioned the word Reiki. Now, I'd never heard Reiki consciously in this lifetime, but it resonated with me. It was one of those synchronistic resonations. And there were 3 of us, including my teacher, who said, "That's something we'll look at early next year." That was October. 2 weeks later, we were in our first Reiki class together. Because I found that once something is presented to you, especially a synchronicity, you have 3 choices. You could either dismiss it out of hand. You could say, "That's interesting, but not right now, perhaps later." Or you could say yes with a capital Y. And every yes led to the next synchronicity, and the next yes, and the next yes. And that started that pattern in my life in my late 40s, my late 30s, early 40s, that opened me up to this. My first marriage had started falling apart because I was spiritually expanding, and unfortunately, my wife was spiritually contracting. And after that marriage came to an end, I was teaching these Friday night classes of meditation and healing. And at one of these classes, this gentleman came and said, "I know this woman who has breast cancer. She's interested in learning more about meditation and Reiki and this type of thing. Would you be willing to meet with her?" And I said, "Yes." I arranged to meet with her on a Sunday morning. And when I arrived, she opened the door and we looked at each other and said, "It's you." We'd never met each other in this lifetime, but we immediately recognized each other. And that started a friendship in which I started bringing her Reiki and assisting her with some things that she was going through. And at some point, it became more than just a friendship. It became love, and we had fallen in love. And it was a relationship that was life-changing for me in so many ways. She had said, in those days, if you wanted to go into a hospital and do laying on of hands, you either had to be a licensed massage therapist or ordained in a faith where laying on of hands was part of the sacraments. So consequently, she had mentioned to me that there's an organization called the New Seminary of New York, which was one of the first interfaith seminaries in the world. She said, "You got to go and meet the founder, this Rabbi Joseph Gelverman, who had founded this along with Swami Satchidananda and several other interfaith luminaries. You've got to meet him. You will love him. This is the program and this was another synchronicity." And I said, "Yes." And we went, met him, immediately recognized him as a spiritual teacher that I had known before. And the funny thing is that when we arrived that day, he looks at me and says, "You're Fuhrman?" I said, "Yes." He says, "I've been waiting for you." But I found that he said that to everybody who came to the school, but that's okay. But he really had been. I think that I sensed it with him, a familiarity. Again, we'll talk more about this in a little bit, but soul relationships, being able to connect with people and recognizing that you've traveled with them before in soul family. In any event, attended the class, was ordained and graduated in November of 1997. And my partner, Judy, at the time, actually was getting sicker. She was in the school with me. She was ordained and graduated with me. And it was a beautiful ceremony at the Cathedral of St. John the Divine in New York City. And in the audience that day was a woman who was coming into the school. And she heard me talking and honoring my partner, Judy, who was a special education teacher who had changed the lives of hundreds and hundreds of children in the New York City school system. Many of them called her mom. And I honored her in my speech. I was the president of the class, and I honored her in the speech. And this woman who was sitting in the audience says, where do you find a man who honors a woman the way this man is honoring this woman? In any event, that was a ceremony. A week later, Thanksgiving, Judy went to a coma, and she passed away January of 2018. I'm sorry, I'm getting my dates mixed up, 2078. I started, of course, I was doing my day job, and then I started going back to the school, and I was teaching, and I was doing video work for them. This woman kept smiling at me. She would come up and pop up different places and kept smiling at me. And I said to someone, who's this woman who's smiling at me? He said, that's Lori Sue Brockway. I said, really? I said, she's in the school. She's new in the school. I said, oh, what did she do before coming to the school? Well, she was a journalist and an author, and she was the editor-in-chief of Playgirl magazine. I said, wait a minute. I said, she's not smiling at me. I'm not Mr. January. But little did I know she was in the audience that day at my graduation and ordination. And she saw me speaking about my partner, Judy, and it had planted a seed. And a relationship later on, a few months later, a relationship ensued. And we've been married, and we've been together ever since. And I've been so blessed in so many ways in this way. Now, again, the ordination graduation, I did it for my motive. She did it because it was something that she had a calling to her. She was interested in the feminine divine, and that was a calling that she had. And one of the interesting things that happened is I was on a business trip out to Billings, Montana, and she was back in New York, and we had the TV on that day, and it was September 11th. And we're watching, and the first report of a plane hitting one of the towers comes through. And we're watching, and the second one comes through, and I knew that what was going on. She was in Manhattan at the time. Her son was attending school out in Long Island. So she was going to go out and secure him. And I didn't get back till New York City until that Friday. When I got back, we landed in New Jersey because the New York airports were still closed. And I went and I met her in her apartment in Manhattan. The next day, we signed up with the Red Cross as chaplains for the Red Cross. And for the next 2 months, we would do our day jobs. And then at night, we'd go to the chaplaincy service, to the Family Assistance Center, and we'd listen and pray with people who were awaiting word of their family members who were missing. With the first responders who were traumatized by the experiences that they were going through. And so we had an opportunity to be of service to the community, another synchronicity that came through, the synchronicity of the ordination, that came through the synchronicity of our relationship. And many things have occurred since that time. In 2016, we were co-officiating a wedding in New Jersey. And we were sitting with at the wedding party with two of the folks who were there, who were the editor and publisher of OmTimes Magazine. Got into a chat with them, and I'd done some little bit of podcasting before. And they said, would you like to join us and do a podcast for OmTimes Radio? And I said, absolutely, another synchronicity. And so the first show I started doing is called Destination Unlimited. It's every Wednesday night at 8:03 Eastern. It's the crossroads of science and spirituality. And then with the advent of COVID in 2020, I had a calling to do a second podcast dealing with the changes in society that we were going through, and to give people courage and hope and support with a guest that I would bring on. And that was the beginning of Vox Novus, the new voice, so I've been doing both of those podcasts now. And I'm grateful for all these opportunities. When I was in business, back in the days that I was in business about 20 years ago, a friend of mine who knew about my spiritual life and the work that I was doing, the spiritual work. He said, how do you do the fact that you have this day job in industrial technology and this other stuff that you do? And I said, without even thinking about it, the day job pays my salary. I said, the other work pays my soulery. This word soulery came out of me. And the next book, after the poetry book, the next book I'm working on is called Soulery, The Compensation of Spirit, talking about all these things that we're talking about today. So that's my story.
That's incredible. Like I say, I've not met you before, but all I was getting when you were talking, Victor, was you're an elder. And I heard somebody say, well, that doesn't mean because of age, by the way. Something I heard someone say recently is in our culture, certainly our Western culture, we don't honor the elders enough. Those people, like a lot of the things that you're talking about is what a lot of people, so I'm 40 this year, round about the time when things really kicked off with you. And, you know, I really see the need for elders, like people who've been there, have done it, have got the wisdom, they've made the mistakes, you know. And I just kept getting that, like, you're an elder for this generation, because so much is changing, and your experiences are really profound. I mean, you said about 5 or 6 things there which were directly applicable to me, you know, and that was really powerful. So thank you for sharing that. I'm sure many people watching are feeling the same as well. But one question that came to my mind, going sort of back to the beginning of when you started, really, is a big question. A lot of people in the kind of communities that we dabble with talk a lot about extraterrestrials and talk a lot about angels. Some people think they're the same thing, but I don't think they are. But what do you think? What is there a difference between angels and extraterrestrials? And if so, what is it?
I agree completely. Angelic realm is divine. It's the realm of God. It's the realm of the energy of love and compassion that has been manifest for us, and our eyes open to it. I believe with reference to extraterrestrials that they are extraterrestrial. I think some of them actually may live under the terror of this earth, and that some of them actually have been here for a long time. But that, you know, we hear about abductions and we hear about negativity, and I'm wondering, especially the last few years, if some of that abduction stuff and the negativity maybe was not necessarily extraterrestrial in nature, that maybe it was something earthbound. So I'm not going to go further into that because I'm not an expert in that. But all I can say is the experiences I had as a child, and these were not angels. I know these were not angels, that my night school experience, for example, but they were positive. And if God created humanity with both good and people with challenges, I won't say bad. I don't like to use the word bad.
Right.
Why not create other races and other species? And hopefully those who would come to us, especially at times like we're having right now, times of struggle, and give us an opportunity to awaken to the fact, you know, it's funny, one of the things I learned when I was in the seminary was that there is an iteration of the golden rule in virtually every religion, everyone, in every religious text and work for every faith. Love thy neighbor as thyself, do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. And if every person of every faith subscribed to those 2 tenets without anything else, what a world this would be.
Right.
And I think that we're coming to the time where we have to look at this horrendous thing that's happening in California. Those people who lost their homes and lost everything, thank God most of them are not injured or dead. But those people are going to need a lot of help. And they're going to need help financially. They're going to need help psychologically. They talk about PTSD. I guarantee you a lot of those folks are going to be traumatized by what happened. But you can see it already in the interviews of some of those folks. We have to love them and take care of them. They are our sisters and brothers. We have to do that. And not only within the domestic United States, but around the world. Our message has to be a message of love and compassion and caring, and not subjugation or control. One thing that came to mind with me, especially about what you had talked about you being 40 now and a lot of these things are manifesting for you. I found that for those of us who are aware of it, who are conscious of it, we have stages of life. Many of us have stages in life. You know, we have our youth, and then we have our early adulthood, And then we get to that age of 40, and I call it the second chapter, where things start opening up. And then when you become the elder, that's the third chapter. So
Interesting. Okay. Yeah.
and I think it's really important that people recognize, I don't need a title to be an elder. I put my message out. If someone finds it resonates with them and helps them, wonderful. If it doesn't, that's okay too. But one of the things that I think we have to recognize is that those of us who have reached that stage of elderhood have a lot to share and have a lot of work, even within our families, grandpa, grandma in that family. Learn from them, study from them. I think a lot of, because of electronic communication with cell phones and so on, that old aspect of visiting with family and sitting there, putting in no phones, nothing, just sharing information, sharing stories, what happened when they grew up. And I think that's really important. So yeah, third chapter. The other thing, and I'll just address this really quickly, and then I'll be open to whatever questions you folks have. One of the things that I recognized when I interviewed Sharnael, within 5 minutes, I said, I know you. We've been together before. We're family. We're soul family. Recognized her as a sister immediately. And Craig, I'm getting that vibe from you also within a few minutes here. I have found that a lot of the folks that I've been called to interview and that I've met in the process of all this work that I've been doing, that I know them, that these are people I've traveled with before. Soul family. And I think it's really important that those of us who are soul family come together at this time. Our world needs us. Our world needs us. Humanity needs us. And we have to help each other, help each of them recognize their soul family.
Absolutely. Go on, Sharnael, go on.
Well, I don't think I've even told you this before, Craig, but I was doing a retreat in Louisiana with a group of people, and went off to my cabin to kind of hang out, and started to fall asleep, or I thought it was, and I saw like this ladder come down from the ceiling, and this little tiny man came down, and he kind of looked Scandinavian, but he was tinier. And he referred to himself as Sven, S-V-E-N. And he looked at me, and telepathically, it was like he was saying, do you want to come up here? And I was like, sure. And immediately, I didn't even have to climb the ladder, but it's my agreement. Next thing you know, I was in this like ginormous white room, and it was a classroom. And there were desks everywhere, and there was all kinds of people there, and they were teaching about human relationships between men and women. So random. And I actually saw Paul Keith Davis there, Craig.
Oh,
and
wow.
I saw Lance Wallno there and some other people. And I remember like walking up to them and saying like, what are you doing here? Like, and just having, whatever. And then someone knocked on my door in real life in the cabin. And when it did, next thing you know, I'm sitting back in the chair, and they were needing my keys. And anyway, I was back, and I don't know if it was like a dream or what. It was very weird. It felt real, like it happened. And what's interesting is, this is a side thing, is I had my keys to my car, but my car moved from where it was in location to another location. I went out there and my car was gone, and I had my keys the whole time, which I don't know what that's about. But anyway, I immediately called Paul Keith and said, hey, I just had this weird thing happen. Did anything weird happen to you like in the last few minutes? And he was like, no, and just kind of like blew me off. And so then I called Lance Wallno, and he was like, that's so weird that you said that, because I just had this dream that I was in this school, and like he had a recollection of it. And then a lady called me who is a dear friend of mine that I've known since John Paul Jackson's ministry. And she was like, hey, I don't want to bug you or anything, but I just had this weird thing happen to me. And I was in this school where these women were like being taught how to love on men, and men were, all this stuff. And like, you were there in this classroom. And she said she saw Paul Keith, and some other people. And she was like, does this resonate with you at all? So I didn't call it night school, even though it was kind of evening. But Victoria, the little girl that had a near-death experience, she would talk about the night school too. Do you think that the night school had to do with the angel activity, or was it more on the ET side, or what do you think night school was for you?
I think night school was ET activity. And the reason I say that is because the beings that I saw, they looked human. They did not have, it was not grays or greens or anything of that nature. They looked human. But I had a sense they weren't. And I had a sense they weren't angelic either. They reminded me of a teacher that I had seen younger, but not in a night school situation, just someone that I saw in my room. And someone who brought me a sense that I would have future visitation, and that these visitations would be not to be afraid of them, and preparing me for that. So yeah, I think the angelic stuff is different. The angelic stuff you feel differently. You feel the angelic presence. You feel the energy. A strange thing happened to me. I think I shared this with you, Sharnael. I've been having a lot of lucid dreams the last 6-8 months, more so than I've had lucid dreams before, but more so that I would wake up and remember the details specifically. And this one dream, I was attending what it turned out to be an angel academy, and there was this huge, beautiful temple, and we were asked to come in, and there was a U-shaped tables going around the center of the temple. And we were told to go to each of the tables, make eye contact with the angel sitting there. And then when they nodded their head, to go to the next table. And we would go around with this group of us. When we were finished going through all the tables, we were instructed one at a time to go back to the main table, the center of the tables, at the top of the U. And we were told we would be given our angelic name and our assignment. I got to share this. I'm going to start tearing up for this because I woke up in tears when it happened. I was given the name Aviel, which means God is my Father. And my assignment was to be an angel to other angels. And I recognized in my human form that I've been doing that for a while. What a message.
Yeah, and I shared with you when we were on the show, or I don't even know if it was before or during live, but I was given the blueprint for my house to be in a U.
Right.
And also my name was given to me by my mom, who had a dream that was told, name her Sharnael, which means warrior and rose of God. And I was born at 3:33. My dog's barking now. And the doctor who delivered me was Dr. Harold Messenger.
Beautiful.
So when you said that, I mean, my mentor used to call me Angel, and I'm looking at him right now. I keep his picture right here behind my desktop. But yeah, I don't claim to be an angel at all. Far from whatever I would consider to be an angel. But it is interesting, and it does make me cry when you talk about this stuff. Like, your voice is healing to me, isn't it, Craig? It's like so soothing.
Yeah, absolutely agree with that. Yeah, no, like I say, very, very, very soothing energy. I was like I said, getting back to the elder thing as well. I feel like I could sit and just listen to you for like hours, like you just pouring it out. No, like I say, I love the discussions and like what you can give in just an hour is huge, and this kind of the wisdom, but the experiences you've had as well. Because I mean, let's face it, as times are rolling on, more and more people are kind of having these experiences, and they don't know how to ground it. They don't know what it means. And then someone like you comes along, and it's like, I've been there, I've done it. It's okay, and you just bring that calm and that peace and that wisdom, And I think that's the job of the elders, so to speak, is to just give that grounding and that practical wisdom of the do's and don'ts. I was curious, when you said before about, and I know there are a few people of a similar age to me who are coming up to kind of, their 40s or late 30s. You're the second person now that said to me, when you reach 40, something shifts. Would you go into that a little bit? And then what happens when you get to, say, the third phase, as I think you put it?
One of the things that I recognized when my late 30s, early 40s was that my spiritual path was reopening, and it was reopening without me intervening. It was just everything was being presented to me. And, you go through your first stage of life, which is basically you become an adult, you might start a family, all of these things, you get a career going, all of these things happen. You hit that 40 years of age, and all of a sudden, opportunities are presented to you to pursue things that perhaps you didn't have time to pursue, or that you chose to pursue but had to put aside until you reached that time that you had that little bit of freedom, that little bit of liberty to pursue the new path or reorganize the original path. I have a lot of friends who started becoming artists when they were in their early 40s, started beautiful painting and wonderful work. Friends who are writers when they hit their early 40s and started writing books and writing articles and things. Angel to other angels, thank you for your gift. Thank you, Kristen. But that was what I'm talking about. And then the elder part about it. Here's the beautiful thing. I'll be 72 next week. And one of the things that this part of my life started really in my late 50s, early 60s, perhaps, where it really became intense. Well, no, it started in the 40s, but being able to share what I've learned and being able to be of help to others really came into its fruition in the last 12, 15 years. A lot of people go into retirement. I don't know what that word means.
Right.
I may have retired from the day job, the career, which I still actually do some stuff on the side. But the real work for me is sharing all the stuff that I've accumulated, all the stuff that has been gifted to me, that's been graced my life, and saying, this is for everybody. It's not just for me, it's for everybody. If you open your eyes and open your ears and open your heart and say, it's time, this is what I want, it comes to you. It really does. I'll give you another quick example of an amazing, miraculous synchronicity. In my first marriage, we had a son who was born prematurely, very premature, and he only lasted 2 weeks. In my last marriage, my marriage that I'm in now with Lori Sue, she had a boy who was born with one leg and a lot of physical challenges. And he's 33 now, he's an amazing young man. He gets around on a rollerblade and crutches all over New York City. He works for a broadcast outfit here in New York City. And Lori Sue had showed me a picture of him when he was an infant, when he was just born. It was the same face as the son that I lost in my first marriage. My son came back to me, and he considers me his father now. His father passed, but he considers me his father.
Wow.
Synchronicity.
Right, yeah.
Synchronicity was a word that was coined by Carl Jung, famous father of psychotherapy. And he defined it as meaningful coincidences without causal connection. Things that happen that you can't seem to find a root for, but that transpired nonetheless. And for me, like I said, these things, when I said yes, I'll give you another quick example. A company I was working for, had been working for a long time. I was not happy with the current ownership. I'll just leave it at that. Won't say why. And I said to a friend of mine, if this gentleman looks at me in a negative way one more time, I'm done. I'm quitting. And an hour later, he did, and I did. Within 2 hours, I had phone calls from 3 other companies that did the same thing, offering me a position, start immediately, at a significantly higher salary than I was being paid. And I said yes to one of them and continued working for that company. trying to think of some others that are, but again, recognizing this, you have to make the leap of faith. Maybe we'll say leap of faith.
Yeah.
That these are the things for you to do. And every time I've said yes with a capital Y, the next one. So, when COVID started, the company that I had gone to work for, this was 2020. So I was like 68 at the time, 67. And they said, we don't know what's going to happen with this COVID stuff because of the fact that, it's just happening now. And you're of the age that they're saying people of your age and higher are very susceptible to this, and it could be terminal, fatal. They said, why don't you take an early, I was going to stay with them for 2 more years. Why don't you take an early? They were very generous to me. They gave me a wonderful parting gift, and continued to pay my health insurance for a while. The very same day that position came to an end, I got a call from the current administration of the new seminary asking me if I'd like to come back and participate in their classes. And a year later, they asked me if I wanted to get my doctorate of ministry with them, and I did. And then they said, we're going to start the Interfaith Temple online. Would you like to be a contributing minister to the Interfaith Temple? And I said yes, and I became Minister of Communications for that period of time. And so again, these opportunities come, and everyone, one of the things that I used to do, I used to teach salespeople, and one of the lessons that I would teach them is, what does the customer really want? And they would say, what do you mean, what does the customer really want? I said, customer comes in, tells you he wants a drill bit. What does he want? And he wants a drill bit. I said, but what does he really want? And none of these guys, I said, he wants to make a hole. So he needs a drill bit. Does he need protective goggles or glasses to protect his eyes? Does he need some type of lubrication to squirt on the drill to make the holes better and cleaner? Yeah. Does he need some type of an abrasive to clean the surface that he just drilled through? Yeah. So the idea is when you look at what the customer really wants, you get an idea as to how to pursue things. And that comes to the same thing. We're all customers in life. What do we really want? I had the privilege and the honor of going to local schools for a company that I work for, and engaging interns to come to work during summer and other periods of time for the company. And one of the things that I would do when I would talk to these interns, I'd sit them down and say, what do you really want? What do you want to do? And a lot of kids today wanted to get involved in programming, web stuff, and social media, and the things that are very common with popular today. But I said to this one guy, I said, what do you really want? He says, I want to work in a factory. I want to make things with my hands. I said, okay, get your degree. If you want, go on for engineering, and then you can do both. Use your skills, use your engineering and then use your hands. So I feel really honored and blessed to have been a mentor to a lot of these young kids who are coming in and saying, what do you really want? And the one thing I taught the salespeople was that you have to take ownership of customer satisfaction. What makes you different? A lot of people sold by price. We'll give you the best price. That doesn't necessarily always work for everybody. Taking ownership, meaning knowing what the customer wants, being there to support them when they make their purchase, following up with them to make sure that things are working out. And I used to say, if you take the word ownership and take out the R and the W, you end up with one ship. And I said, this life is the one ship we're all sailing on together, or we could all sink on together, but this is one ship. And if we follow this concept of one ship, then we embrace each of us as sisters and brothers, and we move forward in this world. And that was one of the things that I would teach salespeople, but I would also share that with people who came my way and wanted to hear that. Speaking of hearing, the other part about it, the other thing that I emphasized was that a lot of people didn't know how to listen. We had a tendency in the society that if someone wanted to say something, everybody had to listen, but they would stop and interject and tell them how to do it right and go through this whole thing without really listening to what the person was really saying. So we have to give each other what I call the gift of true listening, which is another poem in my book. In fact, if you want, I'll share it with you. Take me a second to find it, but I'll share it with you. But the whole idea is to listen without interrupting, without opining, without giving and really hear what a person has to say. And in the process of doing so, not only are you blessing them and giving them a time of grace, but you're going to learn something about them and learn something about yourself. Give me 1 second and I'll find it for you. I got to look it up real fast. The Gift of True Listening, page 44. A lot of poems I know by heart, but some of them I have to go back to. It says, there often are words that need to be heard without cutting in or positioning. Your heart will be stirred and compassion conferred when you offer the gift of true listening. You'll create sacred space while bestowing great grace, with love all around you glistening. It may be any place when a soul you embrace as you offer the gift of true listening. So gift someone near you by saying, I hear you, lifting them up with your christening. And one day when you're due, you will be heard too, receiving the gift of true listening.
Wow. Well, one of the things that you mentioned was, being open to new things whenever doors shut, and I think that people get really excited, especially in January, and everything's like new beginnings, yay, new beginnings. And people have goals and they set all these things in motion. What I think that sometimes they don't think about is when there are new beginnings, sometimes that means there's doors shut as well. And I know personally, I'm talking to a few people, whether they're patients or clients or just friends right now, that are kind of, suddenly a relationship's over, suddenly a job is over, and they're freaking out. And I have been doing my best to just say, like, something's better coming. Like Craig and I had a mutual friend in this last week that we were together in Florida, and I had already spoken to her and said something similar and said, something bigger and better is coming. Like I really felt it, and I barely knew this girl. I feel like we know her now. And then when I introduced them and they connected, Craig basically said almost exactly what I said without us even talking. What would you say to people who are kind of in that goodbye stage, but also not seeing the door open yet kind of deal, because you had it pretty instant where it was like, bye. And then you had 3 phone calls. Like, what about for the people who are still in the hallway of transition, where they're just like waiting for those phone calls or waiting for the door to actually appear to even open at all? Like what, how do you cope with that? Or how do you trust with that? Do you have like a practice or a mantra or?
Prayer, you can pray. Prayer is very powerful. Prayer with intention. You have to have the intention set and say, this is what I choose, or this is what I'd like to do, or what I truly want to do. And make sure it's what you want to do. Because if you don't want to do it, it's not going to happen. So to begin with. My wife shared an expression with me about people who would leave a position and go someplace else. She says, you always want to walk out backwards, meaning don't cut all the ropes behind you, don't cut all the connections. And the company that I had left, I still stayed friendly with many, many people there, and that friendship was really wonderful. So walk out backwards. In other words, always leave yourself that opportunity. The door doesn't have to be closed. Just walk out backwards. The other aspect of it, and I think that this really addresses what the question you're asking, Sharnael. If you make the decision that you want the new position or the new whatever aspect of life, relationship, whatever it might be, and you set your intention, and your intention is pure, and your heart, you connect it with your heart, because the heart, I wrote a poem called The Brain Inside the Heart. Our heart has a brain within it, and that brain can guide us more so than what's up here in the head sometimes. If you feel it in your heart, go for it. If you don't feel it in your heart, one of the things that I used to teach a class in psychic phenomena, where I would teach people to identify whether they were clairvoyant, that they could clearly see, or they were clairaudient, where they could clearly hear, or they were clairsentient, which they could clearly feel. And I said, whatever way you receive information, I say, if you say to someone, I see what you're saying, you're probably clairvoyant. If you say to someone, I hear what you're saying, you're probably clairaudient. If you say to someone, I feel you, you're probably clairsentient. And whichever one of those clairs works for you, connect with it and direct your energy and your intention there and say, I need the answer. Is this my path? Is this my direction? And if you hear that yes, or feel that yes, or see that yes, then it's time to move forward. And if you want to bring it into your energetic field, you have to project the desire.
Definitely a lot to unfold and unpack here with that. And I'm sure I'm going to be, I'll probably have to go back and listen to this again. But I would love to have you back again. I don't know how Craig is feeling. I think he is too.
Yeah.
Or even for like a members meeting too, where we could do like a Q&A or something, if you're up for that. But any final words, and where can people find you? Where can people get your books? This has been such a blessing. I lost a pet and I was in limbo on if I should keep this foster that I had.
Oops.
They were listening.
You got your answer.
And yeah, I mean, there's like ceremonies that you have, or rituals, or I don't know what you call them, about like inducting a new animal in the house, and you know that kind of,
and also grieving the loss of a pet, because so many people see their pets just like family. I know we did when we had our dog. We just, you know. Yeah. So my wife and I wrote that book several years ago. This first book that I co-wrote with her. Because people were asking us, what do you recommend? We lost a pet, or we're getting a new pet. We'd like to welcome them spiritually into the house. What do we do? And that's what we offer in that book, Pet Prayers and Blessings, that came out several years ago. And my little circles and rings over here, that's the book, Circles and Rings, a collection of poetry from the soul. All of these are available on Amazon. And with reference to my shows, I have the 2 shows on OmTimes Radio. I have one Wednesday night called Destination Unlimited, which was my first show. That's Wednesdays at 8:03 Eastern in the United States on OmTimes Radio. And the link for that is omtimes.com/IOM/shows/ and then the Wednesday night show is called Destination-Unlimited. And the Thursday night show is called Vox Novus, which means the new voice. And that's where the shows are. I'm in the process of rebuilding my website. My website is in bad shape. I haven't had a chance to really do that. It's victorthevoicefuhrman.com. But I'm in the process of rebuilding that. There's not a lot to be seen there yet, but I am in the process of rebuilding it. I do share some stories in there that people may resonate with. And that's really it. And the other thing, in closing, if we have a moment to do this, if we can just send a prayer to these wonderful people in California who are suffering so by this literally a catastrophe. I mean, of proportions that they've never experienced out there. They've had fires before, but nothing like this. Mm. And that the wisdom follows after this is over, if there is reconstruction done, to provide more water reservoirs, to provide more ways of dealing with these, to learn the lessons for the people out there, the engineers, the fire engineers, to learn what happened, study that, and then make a way so that these things, even when these Santa Ana horribly high temperature, high velocity winds come, and the droughts, that the areas are sufficiently moist and hydrated to prevent something like this from ever happening again, and that these people find it within themselves to heal, not to suffer PTSD, that the Lord gives them a sense of peace, a sense of understanding, and provides for them as they rebuild their lives, because they're going to have to do that. There's a lot of people affected by that. And that also extends, those prayers also extend to people all over the world who were involved in any type of military conflict, any other natural disasters. And again, the understanding that Every faith has some iteration of the golden rule. Let's take care of each other. Let's love each other. Let's have compassion for each other. And we can change this world if we do.
Perfect way to end.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, definitely thank you so much. And Craig, do you have any final words before we go today?
No, just for all the people I met in the States, including yourself, Sharnael. I've just had a wonderful time. New Year there. You live in a beautiful country. I hope to spend more time there soon. I want to get to New York one day. Are you in New York now, Victor?
Yes, I am. Yes, Queens, New York. Yeah.
Yeah, Queens. So yeah, New York is one place I'd love to go. But yeah, I'm just like I say, arrived back today, jumped straight on here with you guys, and I couldn't think of a better way to start the new year, I guess, back home in England. So thank you so much for that. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Well, we love you guys very much for joining us today. Everybody in the comments, thank you. And please do me a favor, guys, and share this, get it out, because you never know who could hear this that really needs to hear this. Maybe some people in California would be good too, but there's definitely people still without homes in North Carolina and even Florida. When we were there, there's a lot of everywhere. People are just going through stuff, and it's always nice to have hope and love and just to feel like you're not alone. Definitely share, get that going on. I'm actually teaching a class on the 19th too, for anyone who's interested. It's going to be online, and it's talking about designing your 2025 year. And we're going to talk about outcome mapping using imagination. There's going to be just a few kind of like little check mark things of different things that we can do to kind of get our mindset set to have those opportunities to come to our way. And I'll put the links in here too for anybody who's interested in joining that. And then we do have our membership meeting on the 19th as well. And we're going to have Stephen Harefield with us back again. He wrote the Metaphysical Bible, and he also wrote a book on karma. He's a fun character, and I know you guys are going to be interested in joining us for that. If you're not a member yet, the links are all in here as well, and you guys can join us. And all the support that you have, whether you're liking, sharing, or if you are a member to help us, that helps us get the graphics and the production and keep this channel going. So we do appreciate all the members, Kristen and Debbie and Charlene's here and some others who are members. Thank you from the bottom of our hearts for helping us do this show. It's been I couldn't even believe it's 5 years, but yeah, 5 years we've been doing this together. And I didn't even know that apparently a lot of podcasts have popped up in the last 5 years, and most of them don't last more than 9 weeks and then they quit.
Really? So we're doing all right then.
So we're doing pretty good, and you're doing great too, Victor. And I did television and I did podcasts before before Craig and I did this together, and it's much more fun to do it with someone than whenever you're by yourself. So I appreciate him and co-hosting with me, and it just helps us a lot. So love all of y'all. You guys make it great. And thank you so much again, Victor, for being with us. You guys go get his books, follow his links. He is a very in-depth, beautiful heart, pure soul man. And I'm just so thankful that we found each other again and remembered each other. And y'all make it great. Appreciate you guys so much. Talk soon.
Bye.